In 1814, America experienced a great land rush known as Alabama fever. During this time, many people flocked to the area to start a new life. Dr. John Drish was one of those moving to the area. He was a widowed Virginian who, after migrating to the new state of Alabama, had a lavish home built he named Monroe Place. But in the 2 centuries since Drish's death, stories have circulated the area surrounding his home as it fell into disrepair and dilapidation. Accounts of eerie lights of unknown origins, or the apparition of flames engulfing the grand tower that was built as an entranceway. A tower where many believe the doctor met his fate. I'm Ashley McLaughlin, and I'm going to tell you a ghost story. This is Southern Haunts. Born in 1775, Dr. John R. Drish was a native Virginian. At the age of 23, he married and started a family. Drish and his wife had a daughter they named Catherine. But unfortunately, Drish tragically became a widower within the first year of his daughter's life and was left to care for the child on his own. Apparently, that was just too much for John to handle, and he left the poor girl with relatives while he left for Alabama and the Tuscaloosa settlement in 1822. Dr. Drish lived the life of a bachelor for some time after that. I guess he forgot he was an actual father and devoted his life to drinking and gambling with the high society of Tuscaloosa. Legend has it that the doctor had a way with women of the town, and the charming Southern man met a rich widow named Sarah Owen. Seeing a chance to grow his fortune, the couple married in 1825. After some convincing from his new bride, Sarah, Catherine rejoined her estranged father in Alabama. He not only practiced medicine, but also acted as a building contractor for the growing community and used his enslaved persons to build his enormous estate. I want to take a moment here to talk about the enslaved craftsmen that built the South's most beloved homes and buildings. These men and women are never named and never given credit. And I want to make sure you all know that every beautiful thing you love about the South was built or created by Black enslaved people. These artisans' craftsmanship was instrumental to much of the beautiful, ornate plasterwork of the early buildings in this young southern region, and among their ranks were fine plasterworkers, wood carvers, and iron makers. The construction on the new mansion began in 1835. It would become the focal point of a 350-acre estate bordering the city limits. The house was elaborately designed and decorated in the Greek Revival style. The exterior of the home featured Doric porticos to the front and rear and inside. The rooms were ornately decorated with embellished plasterwork and fine woodworking. Inspired by William Nichols, a prominent architect at the time known for his stately designs, Drish designed the overall architecture of the home himself. Using the new home as a showroom of sorts, like many of the wealthy white men during this era, Drish was considered a gentleman architect. Having no real formal education in the field, he somehow designed many properties of the wealthy. After 2 years, the mansion was completed and christened Monroe Place. But many claim that life in Monroe Place was often filled with sorrow and great family tragedies. John and his daughter Catherine's relationship had long been strained due to his abandonment of her after her mother passed. Some have even thought the doctor had become violent and abusive at times. One story reports that John did not approve of a man his daughter had fallen in love with, so he locked her in her room at Monroe Place and starved her until she agreed to end the relationship. Drish then drove the lover from the town and forced Catherine to marry William King. The couple went on to have 3 children of their own, including a daughter who passed at the age of 4. The marriage ended abruptly after their daughter's death. He then sent his wife and their other 2 sons back to her father's home to live with Dr. Drish and her stepmother, Sarah Owen, once again. By this time, the family had lived in Monroe Place for over a decade, and Catherine's return would coincide with an extensive remodel of the home. Drish would dabble in the Italian style, making several changes to the mansion's facade, but most notably, he added a 3-story brick tower. Many claim that Drish added the structure to allow him to jealously spy over the construction of the home rival planter, Robert Jimison Jr. Unfortunately, it is this tower that would become not only the site of tragedy, but also the focal point of the Drish house's supposed hauntings. John Drish had built his fortune on the backs of at least 90 enslaved people that were held on his property. And in 1865, when the emancipation came to Alabama, he was financially ruined. He started drinking heavily and quickly became known as the town drunk. In 1867, Drish fell several stories inside his giant mansion due to his drunken state. There are several stories that surround the tragedy of Dr. Drish's death. One says that Drish threw himself from a second-story balcony, not being able to handle his pathetic life any longer. Another claims that he had been attempting to quit drinking altogether and lost control from the effects of the withdrawals. Yet whatever story might be true, Dr. John Drish was found dead after a long and fatal fall on July 25th, 1867, leaving his wife Sarah a widow for the second time. Years after Drish's death, the home's caretakers would claim to hear the echoes of stumbling footsteps and a deathly cry. Dr. Drish, being the kind of man he was, had left elaborate burial requests for his funeral, and his dutiful widow, Sarah, made sure that they were carried out to the letter. After her beloved husband was buried at the nearby Greenwood Cemetery, she became obsessed with his sudden death and funeral in her grief, growing more and more eccentric as the time passed. Sarah began insisting that when she died, as if it were to happen very soon, she was to have exactly the same elaborate burial her husband had had. So focused on her dying wishes and own burial preparations, Sarah even stored away the candles from her husband's funeral, with the intention for them to also be used for her own. But when she died 14 years later, on April 14th, 1884, those sacred candles could not be found. The home was searched top to bottom, but the candles had just simply vanished over the last decades. Sarah Drish's final wish could not be met, and as a result, many believe this is why hauntings soon began at the Drish house. Following the death of Mrs. Drish, the home changed hands several times. Monroe Place would remain one of Tuscaloosa's finest private residences until the turn of the 20th century, when it would find its way into ruin and dilapidation. The acreage surrounding the once lavish home was sold and used as the site of Tuscaloosa's first major expansion, rural farmland giving way to urbanization and a more modern way of life. In 1906, the Tuscaloosa Board of Education acquired the building, opening the Jimison School, which remained in the residence until 1925, when the building was sold to the Tuscaloosa Wrecking Company. Though the beginning of the Great Depression is often cited as the stock market crash of October 24th, 1929, for those in Tuscaloosa, the economy had already been falling long before then, and the fortunes of the Drish house were in financial freefall. But as the once beautiful building's condition deteriorated, the tragic legends surrounding it only grew. New stories began to crop up around the home's history, and these stories were different to the ones that began after Dr. Drish's death. Instead of seeing apparitions of the doctor and hearing the disembodied sounds of his fall, it was reported that the tall, ornate tower of the estate was sometimes seen to be on fire. Accounts of these flames happened repeatedly over the years. Alabaman folklorist Catherine Tucker Wyndham and Margaret Gillis Fye were among the first to chronicle these claims in their 1969 book, 13 Alabama Ghosts and Jeffrey. They, like so many, claim these, quote, death lights in the tower were the ghost of Sarah Drish herself, stating in their book, quote, according to tales about her home, it is her frustrated ghost who returns to alarm the neighborhood by burning candles in the tower, candles which she wanted to be burned around her coffin at her death. Yet despite the stories and the uncertainty behind the origin of the deathlights or the flames in the tower, there has been no evidence found to suggest there ever actually was a fire in the tower, nor was the tower ever on fire. In the end, it was time that saved the dilapidated Drish house from demolition in 1994. The building had remained standing long enough for historic preservationists to take interest and save the home. The house was still in such disrepair, however, that in 2006, the Alabama Historical Commission added it to the Places in Peril list. Over the next decade, the home would slowly be stabilized and restored to its original beauty. Today, the Drish house is considered to be one of the most distinctive mixes of Greek Revival and Italian-style architecture found in Alabama. But through the centuries, the story of the deathlights in the tower continue, reminding visitors that behind the beauty of the house lies death and sorrow.
Hi there, it's your host, Ashley McLaughlin. I just wanted to take a moment and thank you for tuning in to Southern Haunts. And if you like what you hear, feel free to leave a review and subscribe to the podcast to make it easier for others who like to hear haunty, spooky stuff too. Thanks. Bye.